The pain hit Victoria like lightning splitting through her body. At 8 months pregnant, she collapsed onto her kitchen floor, blood pooling beneath her as contractions tore through her with vicious intensity. As the housekeeper frantically dialed 911, Victoria's phone rang. It was her billionaire husband, Richard. "What is it? I'm in the middle of something important," he snapped irritably. "Mr. Ashford, your wife, she's bleeding badly. The ambulance is coming. You need to come home right now." In the background, a young woman's voice called his name. Victoria's heart shattered as she heard her husband's cold response. "She'll be fine." Victoria's always been dramatic. "Just have someone from the staff handle it. I'll be back tomorrow." The line went dead as Victoria lost consciousness, wondering if her husband would even care if she died. Like, share and subscribe to hear the full story of how this betrayed wife fought back and built an empire, while her billionaire husband's world crumbled around him. A tale of revenge, redemption, and rising from the ashes you won't want to miss. The pain hit Victoria like lightning splitting through her body. She was standing in the kitchen of their Beverly Hills mansion, making herself tea at 8 months pregnant, when her legs gave out completely. The china cup crashed to the marble floor as she doubled over, clutching her swollen belly. Something was very wrong. "Mrs. Ashford." Rosa, their housekeeper, rushed to her side as Victoria collapsed onto the cold kitchen tiles. Blood was seeping through her white cotton dress, pooling beneath her as contractions tore through her body with vicious intensity. "The baby. Something's wrong with the baby," Victoria gasped, her vision blurring at the edges. Rosa's hands shook as she dialed 911, then immediately called Richard Ashford. The phone rang and rang while Victoria writhed on the floor, her cries echoing through the empty mansion. When Richard finally answered, loud music and laughter filled the background. He was clearly at a party. "What is it?" "Rosa, I'm in the middle of something important," Richard said, his voice sharp with irritation. "Mr. Ashford, your wife, she's bleeding badly. The ambulance is coming. You need to come home right now." Rosa's voice cracked with panic. There was a pause, and in the background, Victoria could hear a woman's voice calling Richard's name, telling him to come back to the party. Her heart shattered even as her body fought for survival. "She'll be fine," Richard said coldly. "Victoria's always been dramatic. Just have someone from the staff handle it. I'll be back tomorrow." The line went dead. Rosa stared at the phone in disbelief while Victoria processed what she just heard. Her husband of 3 years, the father of the child she was carrying, had just dismissed her medical emergency as drama. At that moment, as sirens wailed in the distance, Victoria felt something inside her break that would never heal. The paramedics burst through the front doors just as Victoria lost consciousness. Her last coherent thought was wondering if Richard would even care if she died. 3 hours later, as Victoria lay unconscious on the operating table fighting for her life, Richard was posting Instagram stories from a yacht in Monaco. The glittering party was for Catherine Williams, a 24-year-old Instagram model with platinum blonde hair and a body that had never carried a child. Richard had flown her and 20 of her closest friends to Monaco for a week-long birthday celebration, complete with champagne fountains and a private chef. While surgeons worked desperately to stop Victoria's bleeding and save their premature daughter, Richard was captured on camera feeding birthday cake to Catherine, his wedding ring nowhere to be seen. The photos would be splashed across gossip websites within hours, but Richard was too drunk on expensive champagne and younger company to care about consequences. Dr. Patricia Moore, the surgeon who saved both Victoria and her baby that night, would later tell colleagues that she'd never seen a woman fight so hard to live. Even unconscious, Victoria's body refused to give up. It was as if she had something important left to do. The baby, born 2 months early, spent her first weeks in the NICU while Victoria recovered from emergency surgery. Little Emma weighed barely 4 pounds, but she had her mother's fighting spirit. When Victoria first held her daughter tubes and wires connecting the tiny body to life support machines, She made a promise that would change everything. "I'm going to make sure you never need anyone who doesn't value you," she whispered to Emma's sleeping face. "We're going to be just fine on our own." Richard didn't return from Monaco for another week. When he finally walked into the hospital room, tanned and relaxed, he acted like nothing had happened. He brought no flowers, no apology, just irritation that his vacation had been interrupted by hospital drama. "You look fine," he said, barely glancing at his daughter in the hospital bassinet. "Rosa made it sound like you were dying. Women have been giving birth for thousands of years. Victoria, it's not exactly a medical miracle." Victoria said nothing. She just watched her husband check his phone repeatedly, clearly wanting to be anywhere else. That's when she noticed the hickey on his neck, barely covered by his expensive cologne. Her silence wasn't shock anymore. It was calculation. That night, alone in her hospital bed while Emma slept in the NICU, Victoria opened her laptop. The internet was filled with photos and videos from Richard's Monaco trip. There he was, kissing Catherine Williams at sunset. There he was, dancing with her on the yacht deck. There he was, clearly having the time of his life while his wife nearly died, giving birth to his child. The comments were brutal. People who had once envied Victoria's fairy tale marriage were now pitying her. "Poor Victoria," they wrote. "She deserves so much better." But pity was the last thing Victoria wanted. Her phone rang, displaying a number she didn't recognize. Curious, she answered. "Victoria Ashford." "This is Elizabeth Morgan." Victoria recognized the name immediately. Elizabeth had been CFO of Ashford Developments until 6 months ago, when Richard fired her abruptly. "I saw the news," Elizabeth said, her voice gentle. "First, I want to make sure you and the baby are okay." "We're both surviving," Victoria replied, surprised by the genuine concern. "Good, because I have information you might need about Richard's business dealings, his offshore accounts, and the real reason he fired me. Information that could help you take back control." Victoria felt something stirring inside her, a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced in years. "I'm listening." The morning light streaming through the hospital windows felt different somehow. Victoria had been in the hospital for a week now, and each day brought the same routine: nurses checking her vitals, doctors explaining her recovery progress, and the deafening silence where Richard should have been. He'd visited exactly twice since returning from Monaco, both times for less than 30 minutes, both times spent mostly on his phone. Emma was finally strong enough to room with her mother. The tiny baby lay in a clear hospital bassinet next to Victoria's bed, her little chest rising and falling with determined breaths. She was beautiful, with Richard's dark hair, but Victoria's strong jawline. Looking at her daughter, Victoria felt a fierce protection she'd never experienced before. Mrs. Ashford, a young nurse named Jennifer, appeared in the doorway, holding a stack of newspapers and magazines. "I wasn't sure if you wanted to see these, but well, they're everywhere." Victoria's stomach dropped. She'd been avoiding most media since the Monaco photos, but she knew this moment would come. "Show me." The headlines were worse than she'd imagined. "Billionaire's wife fights for life while he parties with Mistress." Richard Ashford's heartless betrayal. From hospital bed to headlines, the cruelest abandonment of the year. But it was the photos that really cut deep. There was Richard, clearly drunk, his arm around Catherine as she blew out birthday candles. There was another shot of them kissing on the yacht deck at sunset. And worst of all, there was a video someone had secretly recorded of Richard on the phone, laughing as he told someone, "Victoria's always been needy. This baby thing is just her latest attempt to control me." The magazine had even done a timeline. While Victoria was rushed into emergency surgery at 3:00 p.m. Pacific time, Richard was posting champagne-soaked selfies at 11:00 p.m. Monaco time. While she was unconscious and bleeding, he was dancing. While their daughter fought for life in an incubator, he was living his best life with a woman 10 years younger. "Ma'am, there are reporters outside," Jennifer said gently. "They want a statement from you." Security is keeping them back. But tell them I have no comment, Victoria said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. And Jennifer, can you bring me my laptop and phone charger? I have some work to do. Jennifer nodded and left. Victoria waited until she was alone, then allowed herself exactly 5 minutes to cry. She thought about the woman she'd been a week ago trusting, hopeful, still believing that Richard's coldness was just stress from work. That woman had died on the kitchen floor. The woman lying in this hospital bed was someone entirely different. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages. Her sister Rebecca had sent dozens of texts with love and support. Her college roommate had sent flowers. Even Richard's mother had called, though Victoria suspected it was more about damage control than genuine concern. But the most interesting message came from Elizabeth Morgan. I've prepared everything we discussed. When you're ready to move, let me know. Victoria saved the message and kept scrolling. The comments on social media were a mix of sympathy and judgment. Some people defended her, calling Richard a monster. Others suggested she must have done something to drive him away. But the ones that hurt most were the pitying comments. Poor Victoria, she must be so embarrassed. I feel so sorry for her. How humiliating. She didn't want pity. She wanted power. Rebecca arrived that afternoon with a suitcase full of comfortable clothes and a laptop bag. I brought everything you asked for, she said, hugging Victoria carefully. But are you sure you're strong enough for this? You just had major surgery? I'm strong enough, Victoria replied, watching Emma sleep peacefully in her bassinet. Rebecca, I need you to understand something. I'm not the same person I was before this happened. I spent 3 years making myself smaller so Richard could feel bigger. I supported his dreams while abandoning my own. I smiled at his business dinners while he treated me like arm candy. And look where it got me. Rebecca sat down heavily in the visitor's chair. What do you want to do? I want to destroy him, Victoria said simply. Not with violence or public drama. I want to take apart everything he's built, piece by piece, using his own weapons against him. I want him to feel as powerless as he made me feel. Victoria, he's worth hundreds of millions. His company owns half the luxury real estate in California. How could you possibly, because I know things, Victoria interrupted. I was married to him for 3 years. I attended every business dinner, every investor meeting, every strategy session. He used to joke that I was too soft to understand business, so he talked freely in front of me. I know which partnerships are shaky, which investors are unhappy, which deals are barely holding together. I know where all the bodies are buried. Rebecca looked skeptical. But you'd need capital, connections, experience. I have experience. I have an MBA from Harvard that I never got to use because Richard wanted a trophy wife instead of a partner. As for capital, Victoria pulled out her phone and showed Rebecca a bank statement. Community property laws are beautiful things. Half of everything Richard owns is legally mine, including voting rights in his company. Rebecca's eyes widened. You're serious about this? Dead serious. Richard thinks he can just discard me and move on to his next young model. He thinks I'll quietly disappear with some divorce settlement and never bother him again. He's about to learn that he severely underestimated the woman he married. That evening, after Rebecca left and Emma was fed and sleeping, Victoria made her first call. Elizabeth Morgan answered immediately. I was hoping you'd call. Why did you reach out to me? Victoria asked directly. Because Richard Ashford destroyed my career, and I've been waiting 2 years for the right moment to return the favor. When I saw what he did to you, let's just say the enemy of my enemy is my friend. What kind of information do you have? The kind that could bring down his entire empire if it fell into the wrong hands, or the right hands, depending on your perspective. Are you interested in meeting? Victoria looked at her sleeping daughter. Very interested. But Elizabeth, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. No cutting corners, no illegal activities. I want to beat Richard at his own game, using his own rules. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. As Victoria hung up the phone, She felt something she hadn't experienced in years: excitement. For the first time since collapsing on her kitchen floor, she felt like herself again. Not Richard's wife, not a victim, not an object of pity, just Victoria. And she was about to remind the world exactly who she was. 2 weeks after Emma's birth, Victoria was finally discharged from the hospital. The media circus had died down somewhat, but photographers still waited outside the mansion gates. Richard had been back for 3 days, but he spent most of his time in his home office taking calls or at his downtown office. Handling the publicity crisis, as he put it, he hadn't held Emma once. "The nanny starts Monday," Richard announced over breakfast, not looking up from his phone. "I hired the best agency in the city. You won't have to worry about anything." Victoria carefully fed Emma her bottle, choosing her words. "I want to take care of my own daughter." "Don't be ridiculous. You need to focus on getting back to normal. We have the Harrison Charity Gala next month, and people will be watching to see how we handle this situation. I need you looking perfect, not exhausted from midnight feedings." The Harrison Charity Gala, an annual event where Los Angeles' wealthiest gathered to see and be seen while writing tax-deductible checks. Last year, Victoria had spent weeks planning the perfect dress, the perfect jewelry, the perfect conversation topics. This year, she had different plans. "Of course," she said mildly. "I'll make sure everything looks perfect." Richard finally looked up from his phone, studying her face suspiciously. "You're being very understanding about all this." "I'm tired, Richard. The last few weeks have been a lot. I just want things to be peaceful." He seemed satisfied with this explanation and returned to his phone. Victoria finished feeding Emma and excused herself to the nursery. It was a beautiful room with soft pink walls and expensive furniture that Richard had insisted on designing himself. It looked like a magazine spread and felt just as cold. In the nursery's attached sitting room, Victoria had set up what looked like a simple reading corner, comfortable chair, side table, bookshelf filled with parenting books and novels. But hidden behind the parenting guides were folders full of documents that Rebecca had been quietly collecting: financial records, partnership agreements, employee records from Richard's company, news articles about his business dealings. Victoria had spent hours studying everything, and a clear picture was emerging. Richard's empire looked impressive from the outside, but it was built on shaky foundations. He'd made enemies throughout his rise to power: former partners he'd cheated, employees he'd mistreated, investors he'd lied to. Most importantly, several of his biggest deals were based on relationships that were more fragile than they appeared. Her phone buzzed with a text from Elizabeth Morgan. "Can you meet tomorrow? I have something you need to see." Victoria smiled. It was time to make her first move. Tilly Hampton. They'd arranged to meet at a small coffee shop in Santa Monica, far from Richard's usual haunts. Victoria told Richard she was taking Emma for a pediatric checkup, which was partially true. They did have an appointment, just not until later. Elizabeth was already waiting when she arrived, helping Victoria with Emma's carrier while she navigated the stroller. Elizabeth was younger than Victoria had expected, maybe 35, with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Not the type of person she'd imagined Richard would hire. "Thank you for meeting me," Victoria said, settling Emma's carrier next to her chair. "Why did you really quit Richard's company?" Elizabeth smiled grimly. "I was the head of their financial compliance department. My job was to make sure all their business deals were ethical and legal. Richard didn't appreciate my thoroughness." "What do you mean?" "I found irregularities in several major contracts, nothing technically illegal, but definitely unethical. When I brought my concerns to Richard, he told me to mind my own business. When I persisted, he started freezing me out of important meetings. Finally, he fired me for not being a team player." Elizabeth pulled out a thick folder. "But before I left, I made copies of everything. Every questionable deal, every unhappy investor, every employee complaint that was buried. I've been waiting for the right moment to use this information." Victoria opened the folder and began reading. It was worse than she'd thought. Richard had been cutting corners for years, treating people like disposable resources, making promises he had no intention of keeping. There were documented cases of him stealing credit for other people's work, manipulating contracts to his advantage, and lying to investors about projected profits. "This is incredible," Victoria murmured. "But how do we use it without it looking like revenge?" "That's the beautiful part," Elizabeth said. "We don't have to use it directly. This information shows us where Richard is vulnerable. We can approach the right people, offer them better alternatives, and let Richard's own reputation do the rest." Emma stirred in her carrier, making soft baby sounds. Victoria reached over to stroke her daughter's cheek, feeling a surge of determination. This child would grow up knowing that her mother was strong, that she didn't accept being treated badly, that she fought for what was right. "Tell me about the Ocean Crest project," Victoria said. "Which investors are most at risk?" For the next hour, Elizabeth walked her through Richard's current projects. The biggest was the Ocean Crest Commons, a luxury waterfront property in Santa Barbara that was supposed to be his crowning achievement. But the deal was built on relationships with three key investors who were growing increasingly unhappy with Richard's management style. If someone were to approach these investors with a better offer, a more ethical partnership, Elizabeth let the sentence hang in the air. "They might be interested in switching sides," Victoria finished, "but I'd need capital to make a competing offer." "Actually, you wouldn't need as much as you think. I've been researching your legal position under California community property law. You have rights to Richard's assets that he probably hasn't fully considered. You could leverage those rights to secure financing." Victoria felt pieces clicking into place in her mind. "I need to make some calls." Over the next week, while Richard traveled to New York for business meetings, Victoria made contact with old friends and connections from her Harvard days. Many of them had gone into finance, real estate, and business development. When she explained what she was planning carefully, without revealing too much, several expressed interest in supporting a new, more ethical real estate development company. The key conversation was with Patricia Williams, her former roommate who now ran a successful investment firm focused on female entrepreneurs. "Victoria, I've been reading about what happened," Patricia said during their lunch meeting. "I'm so angry I could scream. How can I help? I want to start my own real estate development company. I want to compete directly with Richard, but I want to do it the right way, treating employees fairly, keeping promises to investors, building something sustainable instead of just profitable." Patricia leaned forward, interested. "What kind of capital are you thinking?" "10 million to start. I know it sounds like a lot, but I have assets I can leverage, and I have inside knowledge of Richard's weak points. I know exactly where to hit him where it hurts. 10 million isn't that much for what you're describing, especially if you can prove you're worth the investment. Do you have a business plan?" Victoria pulled out a folder she'd been working on for days. "I want to call it Ascension Developments, Rising from the Ashes of My Old Life." As Patricia read through Victoria's carefully crafted business plan, Victoria looked out the restaurant window at the Los Angeles skyline. Somewhere in those gleaming towers was Richard's office, where he was probably making deals and treating people badly, never imagining that his discarded wife was planning his downfall. "This is good," Patricia said finally. "Really good. You've identified clear market opportunities, and you have a solid strategy for differentiation. I think we can make this work." That night, Victoria sat in Emma's nursery, feeding her daughter and making lists. She had funding interest, legal support, and inside information. What she needed now was the perfect opportunity to make her first move. Richard had taught her to be patient, to wait for the right moment to strike. She wouldn't have to wait long. Ascension Developments officially existed as of Friday morning, registered as a California LLC with Victoria as the sole managing member. She'd spent the week setting up bank accounts, establishing business credit, and filing all the necessary paperwork. To anyone paying attention, it looked like a small startup founded by a wealthy woman with time on her hands. Nobody was paying attention yet. Richard certainly wasn't. He'd been traveling constantly, trying to contain the damage from the Monaco scandal and keep his existing deals from falling apart. When he was home, He barely acknowledged Emma's existence and treated Victoria like expensive furniture present, but not particularly important. "I'll be in Chicago next week," he announced over dinner. "The Peterson Group is getting cold feet about the Seattle project. I need to do some damage control." Victoria knew about the Peterson Group. They were old money investors who valued reputation and stability above everything else. The scandal had made them nervous about being associated with Richard's brand. "How long will you be gone?" she asked. "Probably 2 weeks. Maybe longer if things are worse than I thought." Richard barely looked up from his steak. "Try not to have any medical emergencies while I'm gone." The casual cruelty of the comment took Victoria's breath away. 6 weeks ago, it would have devastated her. Now it just made her more determined. The next morning, after Richard left for the airport, Victoria put Emma in her car seat and drove to downtown Los Angeles. She'd rented a small office space in a building 3 blocks from Richard's headquarters. It was modest but professional, with room for growth. The sign on the door read, "Ascension Developments Rising to New Heights." Elizabeth was waiting for her with coffee and a stack of files. "Welcome to your new empire," she said with a grin. "Let's start small," Victoria replied, but she was smiling too. For the first time in months, she felt truly alive. They spent the morning reviewing potential targets. Elizabeth had identified 12 properties currently in development or negotiation that could be vulnerable to competition. The key was to approach the right people with better offers, more money, better terms, more ethical business practices. "The Ocean Crest Commons project is perfect," Elizabeth said, spreading architectural plans across Victoria's new desk. "Richard has been trying to secure it for 6 months, but the current owners are unhappy with his development plans. They want affordable housing mixed with luxury units. Richard wants to bulldoze everything and build pure luxury." Victoria studied the plans. Ocean Crest Commons was a beautiful property with potential for mixed-income housing that could actually help the community instead of just displacing longtime residents. It was exactly the kind of project that could establish Ascension Developments as a company with values. What would it take to outbid Richard? Not as much as you'd think. The owners care more about the development vision than the money. If you could show them a plan that respects the community while still being profitable. "I can do that." Victoria felt excitement building in her chest. "But I'll need architects, contractors, community liaisons. I'll need a whole team." "I've been making a list," Elizabeth said, pulling out another folder. "Former Richard Ashford employees who quit or were fired for refusing to compromise their principles. Good people who would love a chance to work for someone who shares their values." The list was longer than Victoria had expected. Richard's reputation for burning through talented employees was apparently well-deserved. There were architects, project managers, financial analysts, even a few former executives who'd left to start their own smaller firms. "Start making calls," Victoria said. "Tell them we're building something different, something better." Over the next week, while Richard was in Chicago trying to save his reputation, Victoria built her team. She hired Sarah Kim, a brilliant architect who'd quit Richard's company after he rejected her innovative, affordable housing designs. She brought on Robert Martinez, a project manager who'd been fired for refusing to cut safety corners on a construction site. She recruited Lisa Chen, Elizabeth's former colleague in legal compliance, who'd left the company after being told to stop being such a perfectionist about contracts. Each person she hired had a story about being mistreated or undervalued by Richard. Each person was hungry to prove that business could be both profitable and ethical. By Friday, Ascension Developments had a full team working out of their modest office, planning their first major move. The move came sooner than expected. On Saturday morning, Victoria received a call from Patricia Williams. "Victoria, you need to see the news. Richard just lost the Peterson Group. They pulled out of the Seattle project, and they're publicly citing concerns about leadership and company values." Victoria turned on the financial news and watched Richard's stock price drop in real time. The Peterson Group's withdrawal had triggered a panic among other investors. By the time the markets closed, Richard's company had lost $30 million in value. Her phone rang immediately. It was Richard, calling from Chicago. "Did you see the news?" he demanded, his voice tight with stress. "I saw it. I'm sorry, Richard. That must be very difficult. Peterson is telling people they can't be associated with our brand right now. 20 years of business relationships destroyed by one stupid vacation?" There was a pause. "Look, I know I haven't been available lately. When I get back, maybe we should talk about doing some joint appearances, show the world that our marriage is solid." Victoria almost laughed. Even now, Richard only thought of her as a prop in his performance. "We can discuss it when you get home," she said, then hung up and immediately called Sarah Kim. "How quickly can you put together a development proposal for Ocean Crest Commons? If I work all weekend Monday morning, do it. And Sarah, make it amazing. Make it the kind of project that shows the world what ethical development looks like." On Sunday evening, Victoria sat in Emma's nursery, feeding her daughter while reviewing Sarah's proposal. It was beautiful, a mixed-income community that preserved the neighborhood's character while adding modern amenities. Affordable housing integrated seamlessly with market-rate units, green spaces, community centers, local business opportunities. It was everything Richard's proposal wasn't. Emma finished her bottle and looked up at her mother with alert, dark eyes. She was growing stronger every day, more alert, more present. Soon she'd be able to hold her head up on her own, to reach for things, to smile. "Your daddy thinks women are decoration," Victoria whispered to her daughter. "But you're going to grow up knowing that women are forces of nature. You're going to watch your mother build an empire, and you're going to know that you can build anything you set your mind to." Emma made a soft cooing sound, as if she understood. Victoria kissed her daughter's forehead and made a mental note to add childcare benefits to Ascension Development's employee package. She was building a company that would work for everyone, including working mothers. On Monday morning, Victoria called the owners of Ocean Crest Commons and requested a meeting. By Wednesday, she was sitting in their conference room, presenting Ascension Development's vision for their community. "This is exactly what we hoped someone would propose," said Mrs. Rodriguez, the lead owner. "Mr. Ashford's plans showed no respect for our current residents or the community's history. Your proposal shows you understand what we're trying to preserve." "When can you start?" asked Mr. Thompson, her partner. Victoria smiled. "Immediately." The call came on a Thursday morning while Richard was still in Chicago, desperately trying to salvage his reputation with East Coast investors. Victoria was in her Ascension Development's office, reviewing contractor bids for the Ocean Crest Commons project, when her phone rang. "Mrs. Ashford, this is David Kim from the Los Angeles Business Journal. I wanted to get your comment on your new real estate venture before we publish our story." Victoria's stomach dropped. She'd been careful to keep Ascension Developments under the radar until they had their first success to announce. "What story?" "We've received information that you've launched a competing real estate company and secured the Ocean Crest Commons development that your husband has been pursuing for months. Our sources say you outbid Ashford Developments by offering a more community-focused development plan." Someone had leaked the story. Victoria's mind raced through possibilities. Had one of the Ocean Crest Commons owners talked to the press of one of her new employees? Or had Richard's people been watching her more carefully than she'd realized? "I can confirm that Ascension Developments has secured the Ocean Crest Commons project," Victoria said carefully. "We're committed to ethical development that serves communities rather than just profits." "And how does your husband feel about his wife competing directly against his business?" "You'd have to ask him that yourself." The story hit the Business Journal's website that afternoon and was picked up by major news outlets within hours. "Billionaire's wife launches rival company, steals major deal." The narrative was irresistible, the scorned wife getting revenge through business competition. Victoria's phone exploded with interview requests, but she ignored them all. She had work to do. Richard called 30 minutes after the story broke. What the hell do you think you're doing? He shouted before she could even say hello. Building a business, Victoria replied calmly. She was in her office, bouncing Emma gently while reviewing architectural plans. Her daughter was becoming an excellent business companion. You stole Ocean Crest Commons from me. I made a better offer that better served the community's needs. That's how business works. Richard, you taught me that. This is ridiculous, Victoria. You don't know anything about real estate development. You're going to embarrass yourself and make me look like an idiot in the process. I have an MBA from Harvard and 3 years of watching you work. I think I'll manage. There was a long pause. When Richard spoke again, his voice was different, calculating instead of angry. What do you want? Money? A bigger divorce settlement? Just tell me what this is really about. It's about building something meaningful, something I can be proud of. Cut the noble act. Everything I built for us, for our family. You're destroying that. No, Richard. You destroyed it when you chose a yacht party over your wife's medical emergency. I'm just building something new from the pieces. Richard hung up without another word. Within hours, the story had evolved. Social media was buzzing with commentary about the real estate revenge and whether Victoria was justified in competing against her husband. Financial blogs were analyzing Ascension Development's chances of success. Entertainment news shows were breathlessly reporting on the billionaire couple's business war, but the most important reaction came from an unexpected source. Victoria received a call from Sofia Vasquez, a senior partner at Vasquez and Associates, one of Los Angeles's most respected development firms. Mrs. Ashford, I've been watching your work on Ocean Crest Commons with great interest. Sophia said, my firm has been looking for partners who share our commitment to sustainable and community-focused development. Would you be interested in discussing some larger opportunities? Victoria felt her heart race. Sofia Vasquez was legendary in Los Angeles real estate, a woman who'd built a multi-billion-dollar company while maintaining impeccable ethical standards. An alliance with her firm would give Ascension Developments credibility and resources that Richard couldn't compete with. I'd be very interested in that conversation. They met the next morning at Sophia's Beverly Hills office. Victoria arranged for childcare her first time leaving Emma with someone else and dressed in her most professional suit. She needed to be taken seriously. Sophia's office was impressive but understated, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and walls lined with awards for community development projects. Sophia herself was in her 60s, with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. I've been following your husband's career for years, Sophia said without preamble. He's talented, I'll give him that, but he's also ruthless in ways that make good business partners nervous. When I heard you'd started your own firm with a focus on ethical development, I was intrigued. What did you have in mind? I have 3 major projects in development that need partners with fresh perspectives and community connections. The kind of projects that could establish Ascension Developments as a major player overnight? Sophia slid a folder across her desk. But I need to know you're serious about this, that it's not just revenge against your husband. Victoria opened the folder and felt her breath catch. The projects were massive: a mixed-use development in Santa Monica, affordable housing in East Los Angeles, a sustainable office complex in Pasadena. Any one of them would be worth more than Richard's entire current portfolio. Mrs. Vasquez, I understand why you'd have concerns about my motivations, but I need you to understand something. This isn't about hurting Richard. It's about building something better. My daughter's going to grow up watching her mother work, and I want her to see that business can be a force for good. Sophia studied her for a long moment. Call me Sophia and show me what you do with the Santa Monica project. For the next 2 hours, Victoria presented her vision for community-integrated development. She'd done her homework, studying Sophia's previous projects and understanding what made them successful. By the time she finished, Sophia was smiling. You're hired as my development partner on all 3 projects. 60-40 split, with Ascension Developments handling community outreach and sustainable design elements. We'll announce the partnership next week. Victoria drove home in a daze. In one morning, Ascension Developments had gone from a startup with 1 small project to a major player in Los Angeles real estate. Richard would lose his mind when he found out. He found out sooner than expected. Victoria was barely through the front door when her phone rang. Sofia Vasquez. Richard's voice was tight with controlled fury. You went to Sofia Vasquez. News travels fast. Victoria, you have no idea what you're doing. Sofia Vasquez doesn't take on unknown partners. If she's working with you, it's because she wants to hurt me, not because she believes in your business skills. Maybe she just recognizes good ideas when she sees them. This is insane. You're going to destroy both our reputations with this amateur hour revenge fantasy. Victoria walked into the nursery, where Emma was napping peacefully in her crib. Her daughter looked so serene, so trusting. This little girl would never wonder if her mother was strong enough to protect her. Richard, I need you to listen to me carefully, Victoria said, her voice quiet but firm. I'm not trying to destroy you. I'm trying to build something meaningful. But if you keep treating me like I'm some kind of decoration in your life, if you keep dismissing me as amateur hour, then we're going to have a problem. What's that supposed to mean? It means I know things about your business that could cause you real trouble if they became public. I know about the corner cutting on the Portland project. I know about the promises you made to investors that you never kept. I know about the employees you cheated out of bonuses. There was dead silence on the line. I don't want to use that information, Victoria continued. I'd rather compete with you fairly and win on merit. But if you try to sabotage Ascension developments or interfere with my partnerships, I'll stop being so considerate about your reputation. Richard's voice was barely controlled when he finally spoke. I'll be back tomorrow. We need to talk. We do, Victoria agreed. But Richard, come back ready to treat me as an equal, not as your property. Those days are over. That evening, Victoria sat in her office at Ascension Developments, working late while Emma slept in a portable crib nearby. The space was quiet except for the soft sounds of her daughter's breathing and the distant hum of downtown Los Angeles traffic. Elizabeth knocked on her doorframe. I heard about the Vasquez partnership. Congratulations. Thank you. But Elizabeth, I need you to prepare for war. Richard is coming back tomorrow, and he's not going to take this lying down. What do you need? Everything? Financial records, employee testimonials, documentation of every questionable deal Richard has ever made. If he tries to destroy Ascension Developments, I want to be ready to defend us. Elizabeth nodded grimly. I'll have everything organized by morning. As Elizabeth left, Victoria picked up Emma, who had started to stir. Her daughter's eyes opened slowly, focusing on her mother's face with increasing recognition. At 2 months old, Emma was beginning to smile, to respond to voices, to show her personality. Your daddy's coming home tomorrow, Victoria whispered to her daughter, and he's going to learn that your mama isn't the same woman he left behind. Emma made a soft cooing sound and reached up with tiny fingers toward Victoria's face. In that moment, Victoria felt a surge of fierce determination. She wasn't just building Ascension Developments for herself anymore. She was building it for Emma, to show her daughter what was possible when women refused to be diminished. The first strike had been successful, but Victoria knew the real battle was just beginning. Richard returned from Chicago on a red-eye flight, arriving home at dawn with the kind of barely controlled fury that Victoria remembered from their early marriage. Back then, she would have spent the morning walking on eggshells, trying to improve his mood. Now she was feeding Emma breakfast and reviewing architectural plans when he stormed into the kitchen. We need to talk. Now. How was your flight? Victoria said calmly, not looking up from Emma's bottle. Don't play games with me, Victoria. The Sofia Vasquez partnership is all over the business news. Do you have any idea what you've done? I've secured 3 major development projects for my company. I'd say that's a pretty good week's work. Richard sat down heavily across from her, and for the first time since his return, Victoria really looked at him. He looked exhausted, older somehow. The Monaco scandal and the Peterson Group withdrawal had clearly taken their toll. Victoria, I'm going to ask you one more time. What do you want? If this is about getting my attention, you've got it. If it's about money, we can work something out. Just stop this insanity before you destroy everything we've built. Victoria finished feeding Emma and gently placed her in the bouncy seat before responding. What we've built, Richard. When exactly did we build anything together? You built a business while I played the perfect wife. You made decisions while I smiled and looked pretty at dinner parties. You had affairs while I pretended not to notice. What part of that was we? I gave you everything, this house, your car, your clothes, your lifestyle, everything you have because of me. And there it is, Victoria said quietly. That's exactly the problem. You think I'm something you own instead of someone you chose to marry. You think my value comes from what you give me instead of what I am. Richard leaned forward, his voice taking on the persuasive tone he used in business negotiations. Look, I know I haven't been the best husband lately. The business has been stressful, and I've been making mistakes. But we can fix this. We can go to counseling, take a vacation, start over, start over. Victoria stood up, lifting Emma from her seat. Richard, 2 months ago, I nearly died giving birth to your daughter while you were kissing another woman on a yacht. You told our housekeeper to have the staff handle it when I was bleeding on our kitchen floor. There's no starting over from that. I was drunk. I wasn't thinking clearly. You were thinking perfectly clearly. You were thinking about what you wanted, like always. And what you wanted was not to be bothered by your pregnant wife having a medical emergency. Richard was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was different. What if I fire her, Vanessa? What if I end it completely and publicly apologize? Victoria felt something that might have been pity. Richard, you still don't understand. This isn't about Vanessa. This is about the fact that you're capable of having a Vanessa. It's about the fact that when your wife needed you most, you chose someone else. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are. So what, you're just going to compete against me forever? Turn our marriage into some kind of business war? I'm going to build a successful company and raise our daughter to be strong. If that happens to compete with your business, so be it. Richard's phone buzzed with what sounded like an urgent text. He glanced at it, and his face went pale. The Meridian Group wants to meet about the downtown project. They're getting nervous about associating with our brand. Then you'd better go handle that, Victoria said. I have a conference call with Sophia's team in an hour. As Richard hurried out of the kitchen, Victoria felt a moment of genuine sadness. There had been good times in their marriage, moments when she genuinely believed they were partners. But those moments had been built on her making herself smaller, and she couldn't do that anymore. Her phone rang. It was Sophia Vasquez. Victoria, I hope you're prepared for some pushback. Richard has been calling my other business partners, trying to poison them against working with Ascension Developments. What's he saying? That you're unstable, that this is a revenge scheme that will blow up and damage everyone involved. He's also suggesting that I'm only working with you to hurt him, not because I believe in your abilities. Victoria felt anger flare in her chest. And what are you telling them? The truth, that I've seen your work, I've evaluated your team, and I believe Ascension Developments is going to be a major force in ethical development. But Victoria, you need to understand Richard has relationships throughout this industry that go back decades. He's going to use every one of them to try to isolate you. Then I need to build relationships too. Exactly. And I have some ideas about that. They spent the next hour strategizing. Sophia suggested that Victoria attend the upcoming California Sustainable Development Conference, where she could meet other developers, investors, and community leaders who shared Ascension Development's values. She also recommended joining the Women in Real Estate Association and the Latino Business Council. The key is to show people that you're serious about this long-term, Sophia explained. Richard wants everyone to think you're just a scorned wife acting out. You need to prove that you're a businesswoman with vision and staying power. After the call, Victoria spent the afternoon making contact with organizations and scheduling meetings. By evening, she had commitments to attend 3 major industry events over the next month and had set up meetings with 5 potential investors who specialized in sustainable development. She was reviewing her calendar when Rebecca called. "I saw the news about the Sofia Vasquez partnership. Victoria, this is amazing. But are you sure you're ready for this level of attention? I don't have a choice anymore. Richard is trying to sabotage Ascension Developments by telling everyone I'm unstable. I need to get out there and show people who I really am. What can I do to help? Actually, I have an idea. You work in public relations, you're right? What would it cost to hire a really good PR firm to help manage Ascension Development's image? For you, nothing. I'm taking a leave of absence from my job to come work for Ascension Developments as your head of communications. That is, if you'll have me." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. "Rebecca, you can't give up your career for me." "I'm not giving it up. I'm changing direction." "Victoria, what you're doing is inspiring. You're showing women everywhere that they don't have to accept being treated badly. I want to be part of that." By the end of the week, Ascension Developments had grown from a small startup to a company with real momentum. Rebecca had joined as head of communications and had already scheduled interviews with 3 major business publications. Elizabeth had brought on 2 more lawyers to handle the increasing contract workload. Sarah Kim had hired 3 additional architects to help with the Sofia Vasquez projects. Most importantly, Victoria had received calls from 4 more potential business partners, all women who had heard about Ascension Developments and wanted to explore collaboration opportunities. "The word is spreading," Elizabeth told her during their Friday morning staff meeting. "People are talking about Ascension Developments as a company that does business differently, ethically, sustainably, with respect for communities and employees." "That's exactly what we want," Victoria said. Emma was in her arms, alert and content during the meeting. "But I need everyone to understand this is going to get harder before it gets easier. Richard isn't going to give up, and he has more resources than we do. What he doesn't have is what we have," Rebecca pointed out. "A clear mission, a great reputation, and people who actually want to work here. I've been talking to former Ashford Developments employees all week. Richard has a reputation for being impossible to work for. People are excited about alternatives." That evening, Victoria was working late in her home office when Catherine Williams appeared at her door. Her makeup was smudged, her designer clothes wrinkled, and she looked very young and very scared. "Mrs. Ashford, I know you have no reason to help me, but I didn't know where else to go." "What do you want, Catherine?" "Richard, he's lost his mind. When the investigation started, he became paranoid, erratic. He's been calling me constantly, asking me to lie to investigators, to say that you were the one who suggested the bribery schemes." Victoria felt cold anger wash over her. "And what did you tell him?" "I told him no. I don't know anything about his business, and I'm not going to lie for him." Catherine's voice cracked. "But he's threatening me now. He says if I don't help him, he'll destroy my reputation. Make sure I never work in this city again." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to know what he's planning. And because—" Catherine looked down at her hands. "Because I'm sorry. I knew he was married. I knew about the baby. I should never have gotten involved with him." Victoria studied the young woman across from her. Catherine was clearly genuinely distressed, and her apology seemed sincere. But Victoria felt no satisfaction in seeing her husband's mistress brought low. "Catherine, you made poor choices, but Richard is the one who was married. The blame isn't all yours." Victoria leaned forward. "But if he's threatening you, you need to tell the investigators that. That's witness intimidation, which is another federal crime." "I'm scared. Richard knows a lot of powerful people. Richard's powerful friends are abandoning him as fast as they can. His threats are empty now, but if you help the investigation, they can protect you." After Catherine left, Victoria sat alone with Emma, trying to process everything that was happening. Her phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "We need to talk. This has gone too far." She deleted the message without responding. That evening, Victoria was working late at the Ascension Development's office when security called to tell her Richard was in the lobby, demanding to see her. She almost told them to have him escorted out, but something made her agree to the meeting. Richard looked terrible. His usually perfect hair was disheveled. His expensive suit was wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. "Victoria, you have to help me," he said without preamble. "The investigators are trying to make me a scapegoat for the entire industry's problems. Are you guilty of what they're investigating?" Richard slumped into the chair across from her desk. "Some of it, maybe most of it, but everyone does business this way. Victoria, the bribes, the corner cutting, the creative accounting, it's standard practice. It's not standard practice for Ascension Developments. Because you're naive, you think you can build a successful business by playing by the rules, but the rules are rigged. You have to bend them to compete." Victoria looked at her husband, really looked at him. This broken, desperate man bore little resemblance to the confident billionaire she'd married. Success built on corruption had always been fragile, and now it was collapsing entirely. "Richard, I built Ascension Developments from nothing to $100 million company in 6 months, and I did it without breaking a single law or hurting a single person. Maybe the problem isn't the rules. Maybe the problem is that you never learned how to succeed within them. So that's it. You're just going to let me burn? I'm not letting you do anything. You made your choices, and now you're facing the consequences. That's how accountability works." Richard's phone buzzed with yet another urgent call. He glanced at it, and his shoulders sagged further. "That's my lawyer. They want me to come in for more questioning." As he stood to leave, Richard looked back at Victoria one more time. "I loved you, you know, in my own way. I did love you." "I know," Victoria said quietly. "But love isn't enough when it's not backed up by respect. And Richard, you never respected me. Not really." After he left, Victoria sat in the quiet of her office, holding Emma and watching the city lights twinkle outside her window. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to build something meaningful. But tonight, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years, complete peace with her choices. 3 days later, Richard was arrested at his downtown office on federal charges of wire fraud, conspiracy, and tax evasion. The story dominated the business news cycle for weeks. Ashford Development stock became worthless overnight. Several of Richard's business partners were also arrested as the investigation widened. But the most significant development came a week after the arrest. Victoria received a call from the court-appointed receiver who was managing Ashford Development's assets. "Mrs. Ashford, we're liquidating your husband's company to pay creditors and legal fees. However, one property isn't part of the criminal enterprise The Sovereign. It was purchased with clean funds and could be sold separately." Victoria felt her heart race. The Sovereign was Richard's crown jewel, the luxury hotel he'd spent 2 years developing. It was also the perfect flagship property for Ascension Development's expansion into hospitality. What would it take to purchase it? The asking price is $50 million, but given the circumstances, the court might accept a lower offer from a qualified buyer, especially one with a clean reputation. That afternoon, Victoria stood in the empty lobby of the Sovereign Hotel with Sophia Vasquez, Sarah Kim, and Elizabeth. The property was stunning: 40 floors of luxury suites, restaurants, conference facilities, and retail space in the heart of downtown Los Angeles. "It's perfect," Sarah said, already envisioning the renovations that would make it truly special. "We could turn this into a model of sustainable luxury hospitality." "The symbolism is powerful too," Sophia pointed out. "Ascension Developments rising from the ashes of Ashford Developments, taking Richard's greatest achievement and making it better." Victoria walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city. Somewhere out there, Richard was probably in a jail cell, finally facing the consequences of a lifetime of poor choices. She should feel triumphant, but instead, she felt something more complex: sadness for what could have been. relief that the battle was over, and excitement for what came next. "Make the offer," she told Elizabeth. 40 million. Let's bring the sovereign into the Ascension Developments family. 6 months later, Richard was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. The judge noted that his cooperation with investigators had earned him a reduced sentence, but emphasized that white-collar crime carried real consequences. Catherine Williams had testified against him in exchange for immunity, providing crucial evidence about his attempts at witness intimidation. Victoria watched the sentencing on the news from her new office in the Sovereign Hotel. Ascension Developments now occupied 3 floors of what had once been Richard's headquarters, and they were expanding rapidly. The custody case had been quietly dropped. Even Richard's lawyers had admitted that Victoria was an exemplary mother. As the news coverage ended, Victoria turned back to her work. Tomorrow, Ascension Developments was breaking ground on their largest project, yet a sustainable mixed-income community that would house 2,000 families while creating hundreds of local jobs. It was exactly the kind of project Richard would have dismissed as bleeding heart nonsense. The kind of project that made Victoria proud to get up in the morning. Emma, now 8 months old and crawling everywhere, played happily in the corner of the office while Victoria worked. Her daughter would grow up seeing her mother as a force for positive change in the world, never doubting that women could build empires while maintaining their values. The revenge was complete, but it had never really been about revenge. It had been about rising. 5 years later, Victoria stood on the rooftop terrace of the Ascension Developments headquarters, watching the sunset paint the Los Angeles skyline in shades of gold and rose. The city spread out below her looked different now, dotted with Ascension Developments projects that had transformed neighborhoods while respecting their character. Affordable housing mixed seamlessly with market-rate units. Green spaces provided gathering places for communities. Local businesses thrived in ground-floor retail spaces designed to support entrepreneurs rather than chain stores. "Mama, look!" Emma's voice called from the playground area Victoria had built on the rooftop. At 5 years old, Emma was confident, curious, and completely unaware that her mother was one of the most powerful women in Los Angeles real estate. To her, Victoria was just Mama, the person who read bedtime stories, kissed to scraped knees, and occasionally brought her to work when childcare plans fell through. "What is it, sweetheart?" Victoria walked over to where Emma was showing off her monkey bar skills to several other children whose parents worked in the building. "I made it all the way across without falling." Emma beamed with pride. "I'm so proud of you. You kept trying even when it was hard." It was a lesson Victoria tried to reinforce whenever possible, that persistence and integrity mattered more than natural talent or easy victories. Emma would grow up knowing that her mother had built an empire through hard work and ethical business practices, not through cutting corners or stepping on other people. Mrs. Ashford, Rebecca, appeared on the terrace, now Ascension Development's chief communications officer and Victoria's closest friend. "The Times reporter is here for your interview." The Los Angeles Times was doing a 5-year retrospective on the rise and fall of Richard Ashford, examining how his corruption had been exposed and how Ascension Developments had emerged as the city's leading ethical development company. It would be Victoria's first extended interview about the whole ordeal since the initial media attention died down. "Give me 10 minutes, Victoria said, watching Emma navigate the monkey bars with determination that reminded her so much of herself. The interview took place in Victoria's office, which occupied the same floor where Richard had once held court as the king of Los Angeles real estate, but where his office had been all glass and steel. Designed to intimidate, Victoria's space was warm and welcoming. Floor-to-ceiling windows provided natural light, plants added life and color, and the walls were covered with photos from Ascension Development's community projects rather than awards and ego displays. "Looking back," the reporter asked, "do you ever regret how everything unfolded? Some people say you could have handled your husband's infidelity privately instead of competing against him professionally." Victoria considered the question carefully. "I think those people misunderstand what really happened. This was never about revenge or punishing Richard for his personal failures. It was about refusing to accept being diminished. When someone treats you like you're disposable, you have two choices: accept that treatment or prove them wrong. I chose to prove them wrong. Your husband was released from federal prison 6 months ago. Have you had any contact with him? Richard sends birthday cards to Emma and occasionally requests visits, which I allow if Emma wants to see him. He's her father, and I believe children should have relationships with both parents when it's safe and healthy. What Victoria didn't mention was that Richard looked like a different person now. Prison had humbled him in ways that losing his business never could. He was working as a construction supervisor for a small company, living in a modest apartment, and seemed genuinely committed to rebuilding his life on more honest foundations. He'd written her a letter after his release, not asking for forgiveness or reconciliation, but simply acknowledging that he understood now how badly he had treated her and expressing hope that Emma would grow up proud of her mother. Victoria had kept the letter, not out of sentiment, but because it represented something important people could change, even if it took losing everything to motivate that change. What's next for Ascension Developments? The reporter asked. We're expanding nationally. We have projects starting in San Francisco, Portland, and Denver. The demand for ethical development has grown beyond what any of us expected. Victoria smiled. It turns out that treating people fairly and building sustainable communities isn't just the right thing to do. It's also good business. After the interview, Victoria returned to the rooftop terrace, where Emma was now playing with blocks in the early evening light. The routine was important to both of them. Work ended when Emma needed attention, and nothing was more important than being a present, engaged mother. How was your day, little one? Victoria asked, settling onto the cushioned play area. Good, I helped Miss Rebecca with her computer, Emma said proudly. Rebecca had a soft spot for Emma and often let her help with simple tasks when she visited the office. That was very kind of you. What should we do for dinner? Can we go to Dr. Thomas's restaurant? Victoria smiled at the mention of Dr. Thomas Walker. She'd met him a year ago when Emma had strep throat. He was a pediatrician who'd lost his wife to cancer, raising a son close to Emma's age on his own. Their first coffee had led to dinner dates, which led to family outings where Thomas's son Leo and Emma became fast friends. Slowly, carefully, Victoria had allowed someone new into the life she'd built. Thomas understood that Ascension Developments wasn't just her job, it was her calling. He celebrated her successes instead of feeling threatened by them. Most importantly, he loved Emma as if she were his own daughter and never tried to replace her father or diminish Richard's role in her life. I think that's a wonderful idea, Victoria said, helping Emma gather her toys. Maybe Leo and his dad can join us. Yes, Emma cheered, grabbing Victoria's hand as they walked toward the elevator. As they crossed the lobby of what had once been Richard's crown jewel, Victoria reflected on how different her life was now compared to 5 years ago. Then, she'd been living in a mansion that felt like a museum, married to a man who saw her as decoration, spending her days in activities that felt meaningless. Now, she lived in a beautiful but modest home near Emma's school, spent her days building communities and creating opportunities for others, and felt genuinely proud of the life she'd created. The revenge had been complete, but the real victory was simpler. She'd become the person she was meant to be. Mama, Emma said as they stepped out into the warm evening air, why did you name your company Ascension? Victoria smiled down at her daughter. Because it means rising up. Sometimes in life, we have to fall down first before we can rise to become who we're meant to be. Emma nodded solemnly, as if she understood perfectly. Like when I fell off the monkey bars but then got back up and tried again until I made it all the way across. Victoria squeezed her daughter's hand. Exactly like that, sweetheart. Exactly like that.